It was supposed to be a peaceful morning on my ranch. I had just finished feeding the horses when I saw it. 3 black and white cruisers kicked up a cloud of dust as they tore down my dirt road. And then the sirens blared. A voice boomed through a loudspeaker. "Step out with your hands up. This property is under HOA enforcement jurisdiction." What? My German Shepherd, Tank, started barking like crazy. I froze for a second, but not out of fear. Out of confusion. The officers, at least 6 of them in cheap tactical gear, jumped out of the cruisers with weapons pointed. But I knew right away they weren't real cops. Their posture was sloppy. One guy even had his finger on the trigger like a rookie. Another held his rifle sideways like he was acting in a bad movie. That's when I saw her, Karen, in her neon yellow HOA vest, arms folded like a proud dictator, smirking behind oversized sunglasses like she owned the world. "This is a civil enforcement operation," she shouted, as the men started marching toward my barn. I slowly raised my hands, then smirked. "You picked the wrong ranch." They didn't know who I was, but they were about to find out. Clang. One of the fake cops tried to kick in my barn door and trip my trap wire. Boom. A flashbang exploded, tossing him backward onto the dirt like a rag doll. The others panicked. One even dropped his weapon. Karen screamed, "What is this?" I stepped forward calmly and said, "This is my land. And I'm a former Green Beret commander." And just like that, everything exploded into chaos. Sirens in the distance. Real ones this time. Someone had called the actual sheriff. But would they see me as the villain or the hero? 3 months ago, I bought this ranch to retire in peace. 48 acres of rolling land, livestock, and quiet skies. After 22 years in special ops, all I wanted was silence. But the local HOA didn't like me. Technically, my land wasn't even part of their community. My fence was 3 miles away from the last HOA boundary. But that didn't stop Karen, the self-appointed queen of the HOA, from trying to rule over everything she laid eyes on. It started small. A nasty letter in my mailbox saying my fence was too tall and visually aggressive. Then came warnings about my barn being non-compliant. I ignored them. This wasn't suburbia. It was my ranch. But Karen didn't take no for an answer. She started showing up at the edge of my property, clipboard in hand, snapping pictures like she was building a court case. I waved. She scowled. Then came the incident with my tractor. One morning, I found sugar poured in the fuel tank. $6,000 in damage. I reported it to the sheriff, but they said there wasn't enough proof. No fingerprints, no cameras, no witnesses. That's when I started prepping. I'm not a violent man, but I believe in defense. I reinforced my barn, installed remote surveillance, dug pressure-triggered flashbang traps around my supply zones. Military-grade, non-lethal, but effective. I had a feeling something bigger was coming. And I was right. 2 weeks before the raid, I got a notice stuffed under my door. Not mailed. Not delivered by a deputy. Just slid in during the night. "You have 14 days to vacate the premises or face HOA enforcement action. Karen, head of neighborhood council." I laughed when I saw it. But the next day, my power got cut. Then the water. Coincidence? I didn't think so. I called the county. They said the HOA had submitted fraudulent code violation reports. My ranch was being labeled unsafe for habitation based on lies. I went to the HOA meeting to clear things up. That's when Karen looked me straight in the eye and said, "You might have played soldier for Uncle Sam, but here, I'm the commander." I told her, "Ma'am, if you come to my ranch again, bring real backup." She took that as a challenge. And on a dusty Friday morning, she sent her private raid team to my land. That's where we began today's story, with Karen screaming, flashbangs popping, and me standing calmly in the middle of the madness, waiting for the real cops to show up. The real sheriff's truck screeched into view. A deputy jumped out, weapon drawn. He pointed it right at me and yelled, "Drop your weapon." I didn't have one, but Karen was grinning again. She was trying to frame me. I raised my hands and calmly said, "Sheriff, you better check the patch on that guy's uniform. He's not one of yours." The deputy glanced at the nearest HOA cop, and his face changed. "Everyone freeze," he screamed. But one of the fake officers panicked and raised his rifle. A gunshot rang out. Bang! The gunshot echoed through the valley. One of the fake HOA cops dropped to the ground, clutching his leg and screaming. The others froze, weapons half raised, unsure what to do next. The deputy who had fired was now in full control. He spun around and barked, "Drop it. Drop your weapons now." That's when things got worse. Karen shrieked from behind the SUV. "He's shooting at US. He's crazy. Take him down." The sheriff's men surrounded me like I was the threat. I didn't flinch. "Sheriff Barnes," I said calmly, "you know me. I trained your boy at Fort Bragg." Everything went still. Sheriff Barnes stepped out of the second cruiser. His hand resting on his holster, eyes narrowed. He looked at me. Then I looked at the downed fake cop. And finally, at Karen, who was now fumbling to hide something behind her vest. Sheriff Barnes' voice was low but firm. "Someone better start talking. Fast." Sheriff Barnes reached for the radio clipped to his shoulder and said, "We need a federal unit out here. This might be bigger than local." Let me rewind a bit, because it's important you understand how this HOA turned from annoying to militia-level dangerous. After I got the fake eviction notice and sabotage to my ranch's power and water lines, I began documenting everything. I kept voice logs, camera footage, even trail cams hidden in my trees. One night, I caught two men sneaking into my property dressed like utility workers, but they weren't. No ID, just masks. They left after seeing Tank, my dog, and the motion sensor floodlights kicked on. I submitted the footage to local authorities. But like before, Karen had already gotten ahead of me, filing more complaints against me. She claimed I was hostile, dangerous, aggressive, that I had military-grade explosives on my property. She wasn't entirely wrong, but she wasn't entirely right either. What I had were deterrents, non-lethal tripwires, smoke poppers, and flashbangs. All legal under Texas law on private rural land. But she twisted it. She even told the HOA board I was running a paramilitary training camp. So when she brought in her fake enforcement squad, she framed it like a legal operation to shut down a domestic threat. She went as far as forging a letterhead that looked like it came from the county safety office. Except one thing gave her away. She spelled jurisdiction wrong. Twice. I knew this raid was coming. I'd been ready for days. What I didn't expect was that real law enforcement would show up and be so easily manipulated now. I was standing in front of Sheriff Barnes, the man I once trained in tactical hostage scenarios, and he had his eyes locked on me like I was the threat. That is, until he saw Karen's vest. She was still trying to hide the radio. And then it made a noise. Unit 3, hold back. Let him take the fall first, then we move in. Over. Her fake cops had been radioed in from somewhere else. This wasn't an HOA raid. This was a full-blown private militia operation. Sheriff Barnes heard it. So did every deputy on scene. Karen's face turned pale. One of the fake cops tried to run, but Sheriff Barnes' men were quicker. Within seconds, all the imposters were disarmed and zip-tied. But not Karen. She tried to talk her way out. "You don't understand. This is a legal HOA seizure. He's a threat. He has bombs and weapons. He's stockpiling." I stayed silent. I didn't have to say a word. Sheriff Barnes turned to me and said, "Is any of this true?" I motioned toward my barn and said, "Want to see for yourself?" Inside my barn, the sheriff and two deputies walked through what they expected to be some kind of hideout. But what they saw shocked them. Military flags, framed medals, clean weapons in locked cases, a wall of tools and feed. Nothing illegal. Everything is documented. And then I showed them my proof. Trail cam footage, audio recordings, the forged letters, even the sugar in the tank footage of a masked figure whose build matched Karen's HOA treasurer husband. Sheriff Barnes leaned against the stall and shook his head. "I can't believe this." One of the deputies muttered, "Sir, this isn't just harassment. This is a conspiracy." Sheriff Barnes nodded. "And impersonating a peace officer? That's federal. They walked outside. Karen was still screaming about her legal right to control neighborhood safety when Barnes finally cut her off. Karen, you are under arrest for impersonating law enforcement, inciting violence, and trespassing on sovereign property. She froze. Sovereign? What are you talking about? Sheriff Barnes smiled. This land isn't just outside HOA jurisdiction. It's protected under a federal land grant for decorated military veterans. Karen's jaw dropped. I didn't say a word. She started shouting as they cuffed her. You'll pay for this. I have rights. You can't arrest me. This is a setup. Sheriff Barnes turned back to me and said, You got any more of those traps on the property? I smiled. Depends. Are you expecting more guests? That's when the radio buzzed again. Sheriff Barnes, we have another situation. A white, unmarked van just crossed the fence line near the north end of the ranch. License plate came back flagged by DHS. My heart skipped a beat. That was the direction of my wife's greenhouse. And she was out there alone. Sheriff Barnes looked at me. Are you armed? I nodded. Then let's move. The sheriff's voice still echoed in my ears. Unmarked van. Flagged by DHS. North end of the ranch. That was where my wife, Elena, was working alone. I didn't wait for a full tactical team. I grabbed my sidearm, strapped my gear belt tight, and sprinted across the field with Tank at my heels. Sheriff Barnes and 2 deputies followed in their trucks, tires kicking up dust as the sun started to drop behind the hills. When I reached the greenhouse clearing, I didn't see Elena, but I did see the van. It was backed into the brush with its doors open, and there was movement inside. I slowed, crouched low in the tall grass, and gave a silent signal. Tank stopped beside me, ears forward, tail stiff. Through the scope, I saw 2 men dressed like delivery guys, but they were no FedEx. They were loading boxes, not plants, not soil. Boxes marked with serial tags, and something else that chilled my blood. U.S. Army, confidential supply. How did they get that? And where was Elena? Suddenly, one of the men looked up and pointed straight at me. He's here. Bang. Bang. Gunfire lit up the air. I dove behind a pile of lumber, bullets snapping past. And then I heard it, Elena screaming from inside the van. Earlier that morning, Elena had gone to tend the greenhouse while I handled feed runs. She loved that space. It was her escape from the chaos of my military past, the HOA drama, and all the insanity Karen stirred up. We never imagined danger would come from the one direction we never expected, the wilderness side of our land. But now, thinking back, I remembered a few strange things. 2 months ago, Elena said she heard a drone buzzing near the greenhouse, but when we checked, there was nothing. A week ago, we found unfamiliar tire tracks near the creek behind the greenhouse. 3 days ago, the trail cam by the waterline went missing. All the signs were there. We just didn't know what they meant yet. Now, it was clear, this wasn't just a Karen-led HOA stunt. Someone wanted something off my land. And Karen, she might have just been the distraction. Absolutely. Continuing the story exactly from where it left off, with no chapters or titles, and keeping everything intact and untouched. Gunfire kept ringing out. Sheriff Barnes' truck skidded to a stop behind a stack of hay barrels. The deputies rolled out, returning fire, while Tank sprinted ahead and took cover behind the van. Elena, I shouted. Her voice came from inside. I'm in here. They zip-tied me. I motioned to Barnes. He nodded, covering me with his rifle, while I darted across the open clearing and slid into the side of the van. The first guy tried to grab me. Wrong move. I twisted his wrist, slammed him against the frame, and disarmed him in one motion. Years of Green Beret CQB training kicked in like muscle memory. The second guy reached for his pistol. Crack. Sheriff Barnes dropped him with a beanbag round right to the ribs. I yanked open the back doors and found Elena, gagged, hands zip-tied, but unharmed. You okay? I whispered. She nodded, trembling but strong. They were looking for a crate. They said it's buried near the north well. Something from your old team. My stomach turned cold. I knew exactly what she meant. Back during my final deployment, we stored a container, something meant to be destroyed. It was classified gear. But when politics turned chaotic, our units smuggled it back and buried it under deep seal in safe zones until disposal could be arranged. I'd hidden mine, right under the well, on my land. And now someone knew it was here. After Elena was secured, one of the men we caught confessed something chilling. We were paid by someone named Director Marsh. We thought this was just a retrieval job. We didn't know you were home. Director Marsh. I hadn't heard that name in years. He used to run a shadow branch of logistics inside Defense Intel. Quietly disbanded after a funding scandal, but not before he disappeared. And now he was after my crate? What was in there that he wanted back so badly? Just as the sheriff began taking the suspects in, my phone rang. No caller ID. But I answered. A calm voice said, "Commander Holt, you've made a mistake. That crate isn't yours to hide. You have 24 hours to give it up or we'll come take it, permanently." Then the line went dead. Sheriff Barnes looked at me. What now? I looked at the well and whispered. We dig it up. The backhoe hit something solid. Clang. We froze. Sheriff Barnes stepped down from the truck. I waved off the dust and jumped into the pit to clear the dirt by hand. My glove scraped across thick, dented metal, exactly where I remembered burying it years ago. There it was. A long green military crate with a scorched barcode tag, half rusted, but still sealed tight with 2 black biometric locks. I hadn't seen this thing in over a decade. Barnes crouched beside me, flashlight in hand. That's military. What the hell's inside? I took a long breath. Something that was never meant to leave the war zone. Just then, my phone buzzed again. Text message. No number. Too late. Eyes on your ranch. We're closer than you think. I stood up fast. Elena was back in the house, with 2 deputies. But if they were watching, she wasn't safe. From across the field, a red laser that appeared on my chest. Laser. Take cover. Barnes tackled me to the ground as a shot cracked through the trees. Another round zipped past us. Someone was out there, watching from the tree line. Barnes radioed his men at the house. Status on Elena? No reply. House unit, check in. Still silent. I didn't wait. I jumped into Barnes' truck, tires screeching as I tore across the pasture toward the house. The front door was wide open. Tank barked inside, growling. I kicked the door in, gun drawn. Inside, both deputies were on the floor, tied up but alive. Elena? She was gone. But there was a note taped to the wall. Trade her for the crate. 1 hour. Come alone. My hand trembled slightly, but not out of fear. Out of rage. Whoever these people were, they had no idea what kind of man they just messed with. Barnes caught up seconds later. I held up the note. He cursed under his breath. You going after them? I nodded. Are you sure you want to do it alone? I'm not going alone, I said, whistling for Tank. I'm going with him. I knew what I had to do. Step 1, open the crate. The biometric locks only worked with the original squad members' fingerprints. I placed my thumb on the first scanner. Click. It opened. Inside was exactly what I remembered. 1 signal disruptor. EMP fuses. 1 sealed hard drive with an encryption I hadn't seen in years. But there was something new inside. Something I hadn't buried. A tracking device. It had been active, blinking red. They had known where the crate was this whole time. And worse, they knew where I was. I grabbed the sealed hard drive and scanned it quickly with my old field laptop. What popped up shook me. Encrypted files with federal tags and names. Politicians. Corporate donors. Private military firms. It wasn't just about tech. This crate was blackmail gold. And I was the last man alive who knew it existed. That's why Marsh wanted it. That's why Elena had been taken. And that's why Karen, the loudest, most ridiculous HOA bully, was hired to start the chaos. She was never in charge. She was just the distraction. The real enemy was much deeper. I packed the crate into the back of my Polaris ATV and took the side trail toward the old quarry, where the trade was supposed to happen. I had my old gear: vest, radio, emergency flare, EMP grenade, sidearm, and tank by my side. Barnes tried to follow, but I waved him off. If I don't come back, call Fort Sam. Ask for General Rayner. He'll know what this is. Barnes saluted me. I gave him a nod and drove off into the dusk. I arrived at the quarry. Dark. Empty. Wind whistling through rocks. Then headlights turned on. A black SUV crept forward. The passenger door opened, and Elena stepped out, blindfolded, hands tied. Right behind her, Director Marsh, alive, older, smiling. Let's talk, Commander. Continuing the rest of the story in the same format, without chapters or titles, and keeping everything exactly as written. Marsh's face was older, colder, but unmistakable. You've aged well, Commander Holt, he said, stepping out from behind Elena like a ghost from my past. I kept my eyes locked on him. My gun was holstered, crate strapped to the ATV behind me, and Tank growling softly at my side. You're supposed to be dead. He chuckled. Aren't we all? But here we are. He tapped Elena's shoulder and pushed her forward. She's unharmed. For now. Let's keep it that way. I stared at him. You want the crate? I asked. Then let her go. He raised a finger and wagged it. No, no, no. That's not how this works, John. I know you. You won't stop unless I give you a reason to. I need guarantees. Behind him, more vehicles crept into the clearing. 6 total. Armed men stepped out, circling the quarry. We were surrounded. Marsh snapped his fingers. One of the men raised his rifle and pointed it at Elena's head. Back in Afghanistan, my unit discovered a covert stash buried by rogue operatives. Prototype gear that hadn't been sanctioned by the Pentagon. Among the tech was something very dangerous. A portable signal disruptor that could knock out drones, satellites, even regional comms grids without detection. Our commander at the time, Marsh, ordered us to destroy it. But he disappeared before the job was done. A few of us buried the crates deep in safe zones, far from civilian areas, hoping someone up top would deal with them later. But later never came. And now it seemed Marsh wanted his gear back. Which made no sense unless he was using it or selling it. And now I have the last piece. I raised both hands slowly. All right, Marsh. I'll make the trade. The crate for her. He tilted his head. You sure? No hidden knife? No backup team hiding in the woods? I smirked. You tell me. You've been watching me for days. He motioned for 2 men to approach. Bring me the crate. I waved toward the ATV. 2 of Marsh's thugs moved cautiously, rifles still trained on me, and began pulling the crate off the trailer. As they hauled it toward Marsh, Elena stumbled and nearly fell. One of the men yanked her upright. That was his mistake. Tank lunged with a snarl and tore into the man's arm. The gun went flying. Elena dropped and rolled. That was my cue. In one fluid motion, I rolled left, drew my sidearm, and shouted, Down. Bang. Bang. 2 hostiles dropped. Smoke burst from the crate. I had wired it with a flash charge. Light and sound detonated, disorienting the entire squad. Elena ran. Tank followed. I covered them, firing controlled bursts until they reached cover behind my ATV. You idiot. Marsh screamed, firing blindly into the smoke. I took cover behind a boulder, shielding Elena with my body. She was safe. For now. But Marsh wasn't done. He radioed his men. Execute protocol red. Burn the site. Suddenly, one of the SUVs pulled forward, doors opening to reveal something far more dangerous, a mini-drone launcher. I had seconds to react. I pulled out my EMP grenade, the only one I had, and yanked the pin. Cover your ears. Zap. The pulse exploded in a sphere of blue static. The drones froze midair, then dropped like rocks. The vehicles shut down. Lights flickered. Radios died. Everything electronic, fried. Marsh staggered back, furious. You think that stops me? Do you even know who funded this operation? I'm not alone, Holt. This goes all the way to crack. A single gunshot silenced him. He collapsed. The clearing went silent. Elena gasped. Who shot him? Then, from the shadows, stepped a figure in a U.S. Marshal's windbreaker. Sheriff Barnes. He held his rifle up. He had a federal warrant. Been tracking him for months. I stared at him, stunned. You followed me? He nodded. Didn't trust that trade. And neither did your old team. One by one, armed federal agents stepped out from the tree line. Silent. Professional. Then someone else stepped forward. An older man in a crisp uniform. Commander John Holt. Good to see you again. It was General Rayner, the man I hadn't seen since my retirement ceremony. We've got cleanup to do. But first, that hard drive. Where is it? I reached into my vest, but the pocket was empty. Gone. Stolen. And just before I could speak, a distant explosion echoed across the valley. Back at my ranch, something or someone had just taken the drive. I looked down at my empty vest pocket. The hard drive gone. Someone had lifted it during the chaos. General Rayner's eyes narrowed. Was that your ranch? I nodded slowly. It was. Rayner turned to his men. Mobilize. If they hit the ranch, they're trying to erase evidence or collect it. Either way, we move. Now. But I was already ahead of him, jumping into my ATV and speeding toward the smoke, heart pounding, Elena clutching my arm. Whoever took the drive just made this personal. As we crested the final hill, the ranch came into view, and someone was waiting on my porch, wearing my uniform. Let's rewind just a moment. When I left the military, I cut all ties with my old team, except a handful of trusted friends. One of them was Brad Keller, a field tech I once pulled out of a burning convoy in Kandahar. He was smart, resourceful, but also easily tempted. After the incident with Marsh, I'd been exchanging coded emails with Brad. He said he was off the grid, but wanted to help me monitor the crate's signal in case anyone came for it. Now I realized the truth. He never disappeared. He was working with Marsh, or worse, working alone, trying to sell the drive himself. And the man standing on my porch in my uniform was Brad. The second I stopped the ATV, I shouted, "Brad, don't do this." He didn't raise a weapon. He just smiled and held up the drive between two fingers. "Do you even know what's on this thing, Holt?" "I do," I said, gun aimed straight at his chest. "And that's why you're not walking away with it." He laughed. "It's too late. I've already uploaded it to a secure server. The highest bidder gets it. This isn't personal, man. It's just business." "You're selling out your own country," I said, teeth clenched. "No, I'm selling out the system that left guys like us behind." He tossed a flash grenade toward the front steps and disappeared into the house. I covered Elena as the blast hit. Then I charged in behind Tank, every corner of the house searing with adrenaline. Inside, smoke billowed. Gunshots cracked. Brad fired wildly from the stairwell. Tank lunged. I followed, clearing room by room, just like I had in the villages overseas. I cornered him in my old office, the one place he knew I'd check last. "End of the line, Brad." He held the drive in one hand, a pistol in the other. "I didn't want this to end like this, John. You were my mentor." "Then listen to me," I said. "Put the gun down. Hand over the drive. Walk away alive." "Can't do that." "Then I will." Bang. One shot. Clean. His gun dropped. The driver skidded across the floor. And just like that, it was over. General Rayner arrived minutes later with a full sweep team. They secured the drive, took Brad's body into custody, and debriefed me under a tent while black SUVs swarmed my ranch like bees on honey. Rayner placed the drive into a sealed case. "What's on here will take down 20 years of dirty operations." I looked him in the eye. "Bury it, or expose it. But don't let it end up in the wrong hands again." Rayner nodded. "You've done more than enough, Commander. It's time you rest." But I wasn't sure I could. Elena held my hand and smiled through tears. "Maybe now we finally can." A month later, the HOA was dissolved after federal investigations revealed it had been a front for money laundering by Marsh's network. Karen? Serving time for impersonating an officer, falsifying reports, and conspiracy to commit armed trespass. Sheriff Barnes was promoted, officially joined a multi-agency task force on deep state corruption. As for me, I kept the ranch. But this time, I planted cameras in the trees. I reinforced every entry point. and I buried the past, literally and metaphorically. Until one day, a package arrived. No return address. Inside, just a note. This isn't over. You only cut off one head. I held the note over the fireplace and watched it burn. Let them come.